Welcome to week 4, module 1. The stock market's going up again, great. But again, when it goes up, it's also got to go down, right? And let's hope the down is like the little downs we saw here, but it's doing great right now. We're first going to talk about profit sharing plans, which is by far the most common defined contribution plans. This week we're going to spend our time on defined contribution plans. In the 1980s and 90s, this was common as a profit-sharing / 401k plan as a combination to get maximum bang for the buck for retiring. I personally felt at the time it was an attempt to go from where the employer was contributing under profit sharing to getting the employee to invest under the 401k plan. And after the tax law got changed in about 2000 thereabouts, it kind of confirmed what I was thinking. We today find a lot fewer profit sharing plans out there, even on small companies, and a lot more emphasis on 401k plans because of these changes. So we are going to look at how they are today, realizing that plans do change, believe it or not. The government's changed the plans. Certainly, if you look back over 30 years and the different plans that have been in effect, and those that are still in effect that are changed, and some of the new plans we've got. So let's take a look, starting at the profit sharing, which is, again, a very popular benefits plan. Major feature of the profit sharing plan, again, I'm using the IRS for the features because this is what they plan. Can have other retirement plans. Again, we saw that on defined benefits also, and it's rare. I've never seen one where they had defined benefits and a defined contribution plan for the same people, but in theory you could. My thing is that have to generate an awful lot of profits in cash to be able to do both. It's hard enough to just do the defined benefits plan. And there's a cap on it, and the cap being the amount of the defined benefits plan. It can be a business of any size. One company I dealt with had 10 employees who was in the profit sharing plan, and you could have a business that was 100,000. And again, once again, you're going to have to file Form 5500. That's kind of standard for anything that's qualified, and even some non-qualified have to file it. You need to make contributions each year. I'm sorry, you don't. That's the key. You don't have to make contributions each year. And that was sort of like going from the employers paying to the employee paying. Profit sharing was the first one that said, well, contributions don't have to mean every year. The goal was 3 years out of 5. Then it could have been more flexible, as we found out in the last 5 years when a lot of companies couldn't make any contributions, or maybe just 1 year. And I might note, if they don't make a contributions a year, the employee has a right to use a 401k plan to the max, or what I recommend people do is make also use of the IRA, because if there's no plan in effect, including a 401, if the only plan being the profit sharing and nothing was being paid that year, then the IRA can be used for maximum advantage. As with the 401k plans, you can make a profit sharing plan as simple or as complex as you want to. Pre-approved profit sharing plans are available to cut down administrative headaches, and I really recommend, again, use of your Fidelity, Vanguard, or banks. I don't want to mention any of the banks because I actually did once, and I had an employee of another bank complaining I didn't mention his bank. But the banks are very helpful also, and I like that the plans are simple. I can understand them, where if I go and try doing it on my own, I'm sure no one will understand it. And let's face it, it's a lot easier, and the IRS loves those plans. They all are coordinated with the IRS, so everything's going for it, except for some control idiot like myself who says, I want to do it my way, right? Always have a control freak in the crowd. Major features continued, again from the IRS. You don't need profits in order to make contributions to profit sharing plan. Of course, having a profit would probably make it easier to actually contribute something. You could use retained earnings, is what people do if they don't have enough profits this year. Of course, the last 4 years, companies have been bleeding for cash because the banks won't lend money to small businesses, and therefore, quite honestly, a lot of them couldn't make any kind payments. There's no cash. Retained earnings are not cash. Neither are profits really. You got to have some way of financing it, and that's going to be cash. Contributions, profit sharing plan are discretionary. There's no set amount you need to make. If you can afford to make some amounts in the contributions plan, they go ahead. So some years you can give less, some years more. You're limited by the index values that are in your textbook for the year, and each year it's different, so it's hard to generalize what it'll be next year. We can only look at what we've seen the increase rates to be the last few years, but again, the past is not indicative necessarily of the future. If you do need contributions, you will need to have a set formula for determining how the contributions are divided. The money goes into a separate account for each employee. Again, this is usually handled by the trustee, so it becomes a trustee's problem, not the problem of an employer. And I like the profit sharing, having had it, because I can see exactly how much money I got in it, because I got a report every quarter. Some companies give it every month, so that you can keep in track of how your plan is doing. In fact, online now, some of the companies are letting you go online, so if you want to check every day. Although I discourage people checking these things every day, because when it goes down a little bit, they get very depressed. When it goes up, they get too hyper, and it's a long term. It's like I try telling people, it doesn't matter what's in there today, it's what's matter on the day you retire and why you retired. That's when it matters. Allocation of benefits may be based on salary, years with the company, and or compensation. Must still meet qualification requirements, however. And again, there's also departmentalized, we'll see, where you can have different plans for different departments. A simple profit sharing plan, again using IRS information. Common method for determining each participant's allocation of profit sharing plan is the COP to COP method. Under this method, the employee calculates the sum of all of its employees' compensation, the total comp. To determine each employee's allocation of the employee's contribution, you divide the employee's compensation, which is the employee comp, by the total comp. You then multiply each employee's fraction by the amount of the employee's contribution. Using this method, you get each employee's share of the employer contribution. This was on the CFP exam about 7 or 8 years ago. Had you do an example of one of these, where it was based on salary, and you had to allocate the salary between the 4 people for the compensation. But I was surprised people got it wrong. Pros and cons: greatest flexibility in contributions than any plan. Contributions are strictly discretionary. Good plan if you have cash flow as an issue, and I think most small companies do, and that's where it's awfully risky for them to come up with a defined benefit plan that's giving guaranteed big returns for the owner. Do you have enough cash? And I've seen where owners had to lend money to the company, cash to the company, to fund his retirement plan. Administrative costs may be higher than under more basic arrangements. In other words, we'll find some plans for smaller companies that are administratively much easier to handle. These are, however, much easier to handle than defined benefits, and do not cost anywhere near the amount of money. And the amount you have to pay really depends not only on the trust, but who you're dealing with. I've dealt with several different organizations. When I was with one company where we were trying to find which plan to use, and we looked at Fidelity, Strong, Invesco, etc., and big differences as to what it was going to cost us and the amount of administration we had to do as opposed to what they did. Another thing unique about the profit sharing plan, it's employer contributions only. Remember, on defined benefits, they can require you under the plan to have to put in 2 or 3%, something like that, of your salary to be in the plan. Profit sharing is strictly the company providing it. And again, don't confuse profit sharing plan with profits. It has nothing to do with it. It has to do with cash. Contribution limits are the lesser 25% of compensation or an index amount. Big increases over the last 10 years, which is good because people need more money for retirement than they think they do. Going back to week 2, we had, week 1, module 2, we had Leroy, who is one of my clients. He actually needed more money each year to save for retirement than he earned. Why? Because it wasn't realistic. Again, with the 401k plan, less than 25% of salary, which would be comparable for most people. Did not have to worry about the compensation amount because that tends to be a fairly high number. Can have other retirement plans also. Again, much like the other plans, there's only a few of the smaller plans that restrict you from having other plans, and those are not qualified. A subset of profit sharing plans are what we're going to talk about now. The first one is the stock bonus plan, which was popular back when I was still working full time for large companies. The stock bonus plan is similar to a profit sharing plan, except the benefits are distribution of the company's employee stock, employer stock rather, to the employees. And again, do you get the stock now? No, the purpose is it's used for retirement, it's a savings, but the tool is the company stock. Now, this is good if the company has stock that they feel they probably are trying to build up the price of the stock, and the way you build up the price of the stock, you build up demand. So if you give 500,000 shares to your employees, let's say that it looks like there's a big demand for it, and people start raising the price of the stock. And I had one situation I was involved with, but that's exactly why they went in this plan, to be able to, every couple of years, boost up the value of the stock by contributing it to the plan. This has to be done continuously. The tax advantage way for employees to acquire company stock at low cost to the employer. The disadvantage of this one, to me, quite honestly, and I'll sit right up front, is you're only in that one company. And if all of your retirement is tied to one company and the value of the stock goes down or the company goes out of business, you're stuck. And I worked for 4 large companies in my life. A company called Logicon, a company called Hughes, a company called Lytton, and a company called Aerojet. None of them are really existing today, at least the divisions I worked in. And when they leave, the retirement plans sort of get destroyed. So, and having my own business is the same type of situation. If I sold the business, typically the retirement plans got changed. So we have to take a look at whether that stock is a good idea. Company can broaden its ownership to prevent a hostile takeover of the company. That's another reason they might go to this. And employees are not taxed until the shares are distributed. Being qualified, all the requirements of qualified plan apply, which means, as a basic rule, you cannot take the money out before 59.5 unless you have equal payments over a period of time. And the problem, again, it's a non-diversified portfolio. One company, now, I guess if it was over long term, Apple would be good, even though it's had some bumps, but there's very few of those. ESOPs, employee stock option program. Back when I was in school, this was probably the hottest thing around. Employees being able to buy the company they worked for, and I know in the auto industry there's a company called Studebaker, as well as another one I can't even think right now that have gone out of business, but they were trying to set up ESOPs for the employee to buy it. The problem with it really is that the employees don't get to buy the company and get to be the bosses, and smoke the cigars and put their feet on the desk. It's the retirement plan. And I am amazed when they first came out with the ESOPs, no one ever mentioned that to the employees, that they have no access to it until they retired, and the stock provided this retirement. And people had to learn the hard way, and when people did learn the hard way and they got burned because the stock went down or the company went out of business, it made a very bad image. So I don't think that image has improved much, because you don't really see many ESOPs, but it is a form of retirement plan under profit sharing. And an ESOP must be designed to invest primarily in qualifying employer securities as defined by the IRS code, must meet certain requirements of the code and regulations. This is one of those that's going to cost you a lot of money because of the legal time involved. It takes a lot of time for the lawyers to draft all this material. There's no template they can work with. The IRS and Department of Labor share jurisdiction over some ESOP features, and I'll tell you right now, if you deal with the IRS alone, tough. If you deal with the Department of Labor alone, tough. But when you got to deal with both of them together, it's impossible. And I've had that position several times where I felt like I was caught in the middle between the IRS and Department of Labor. For those of you who work in an industrial company, it's like California OSHA versus national OSHA. They never talk to each other, and they never agree on anything. And so everything's held up. Well, that happens here. Contributions to the plan are made in shares of employer stock or cash that is used to buy employer stock. Shares are allocated to employee accounts, usually based on compensation. I only have one shot on this because it's not big, it's not that important for your clients because it's so rare, and you probably in your whole career never run into it, but it's a lot more complicated. As I mentioned before, the lawyers are going to have a lot of time. There's trust agreements in place, and the employees don't get any retirement plan until they pay off the debt, etc. The person who sold them the stock, the employer, must invest the stock in another the money in another company within a period of time, or they're going to get taxed on it. It's not like a nice rollover. Okay, the next plan is new comparability plans, and I guess it's called that because it's been showing up in the textbooks the last few years. Again, I think some lawyer came up with this and it worked, so like so many other times, that's how a lot of these plans come up. It qualifies for the defined contributions plan, and therefore it works, but it's similar to age-based profit-sharing plans, as they allocate contributions based on age and compensation, but add groupings of employees by job, length of employment, compensation, or other factors. For example, in one company, their engineers were in one contribution group, their administrative people were in another, and the manufacturing were in another. You could also have it by, if you have several divisions, one division has one, another division has another. Again, you still have the 5,500 form to fill out, and it's really not that different, therefore, than the other plans that we're talking about. This allows each employee group to have different allocation formulas based on age and compensation within the group, because they're standalone. This allows the employer to distribute more to some groups and less to others, for example, to the engineers or the senior people who aren't quite highly compensated employees. And it's a very beneficial plan for older employees or key employees. Last we have here, I think it's the last, the thrift or savings plan. These actually go back to the 1960s when President Nixon was pushing everybody into these things, and they kind of went away, probably because Richard Nixon was pushing them. But it must be authorized by your 401k plan. In other words, you have to look at the plan set up for the 401k plan, and it allows employees to make additional contributions to the 401k plan beyond the plan limits. The earnings growth tax deferred until distribution, and the contribution by employees give the employees a basis in the plan, which means it's going to be taxed today. Thrift or savings plans are taxed today, but the growth is not going to be taxed. When we get to IRAs later on, we have the same thing. We have some IRAs where you pay the tax on the IRA today, but the growth grows. And when you take the money out, the part that you put in, which is called your basis, is not taxed when you take it out. And I think a lot of people feel good when they don't have to pay tax on part of the money they take out.